We are talking brand new Dynasty ADP for wide receivers and tight ends on today's episode of Locked On Dynasty.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Matt Williamson and Ryan McDowell.
Thanks for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. Welcome to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan McDowell. You can follow me on Twitter at RyanMC23. Joining me, as always, is Matt Williamson. Find Matt on Twitter at WilliamsonNFL. Matt, how's it going?
It's going great. How about you?
Going well. We answered some questions. Really enjoyed that quarterback conversation we had yesterday. It's just making me look forward to all of the movement that we're going to see this offseason. You know, I was thinking this time last year, if you go back a year, we had no idea that we were going to see Devontae Adams get traded, Tyreek Hill get traded, Deshaun Watson AJ Brown, Deshaun Watson get really one of the craziest contracts in league history. So, we'll just find out if this offseason can live up to what we saw last year. I certainly hope it can with all the wild moves.
Yeah, real quick, I love the quarterback conversation. We should make a note to revisit that in a month or so, after Mayfield and Darnold and those guys play out the stretch, or Mike White or some of these dudes that are questionable. Maybe we'll change our tunes quite a bit.
Yeah, very, very good point. We'll definitely do that. One thing that I do and share on Twitter during the offseason is positional landscape. And really all it is just depth charts that I kind of track, and along with a list of the free agents and incoming rookies, and just trying to get an idea for what those team situations and player situations will really look like. And sometimes it's tough to keep up with all the movement in the off season or where players even are at the moment. So those are helpful and definitely can lead to some good conversations on here for sure.
For sure.
Matt, last week we talked about our new December Dynasty ADP from Dynasty League Football. We looked at the top 10 quarterbacks and running backs. Today we're focused on those pass catchers. We'll look at the top 10 wide receivers and tight ends. Let's start with the wide receivers. Wide receiver one and the number one overall player is Justin Jefferson. Right behind him, Jamar Chase. I feel like we always say it.
Just skip over it.
No real surprise there. I think if anything, those two have really, even more so established themselves as the top two players in Dynasty. Not only are they still very young, but they're performing on the field really week in and week out. And they're kind of the two safest things in Dynasty leagues right now.
Yeah.
And obviously,
I think number 3 is just as solid almost. Not the same tier, but I think he's as solid as at 3.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. The wide receiver 3, still a first rounder, is AJ Brown. And I'm with you. I don't think, maybe you can make a case for some of these others that we'll get to, but Brown might be in a tier of his own here at the third spot. He's at least for me, and based on our ADP, this is true as well. He's not in that Jefferson Chase group, but I see a pretty sizable gap between he and the other names that we'll mention here.
Amazingly, the move to Philly's been good for him.
Right.
Tennessee didn't throw him go balls. I mean, he does that kind of stuff now too.
Well, and there were questions about that move that Jalen Hurts was not good enough to support AJ Brown. And of course that just feels
right.
That feels crazy right now to think about that. But you feel very secure with Jamar Chase's quarterback situation, with AJ Brown's quarterback situation. These are the top 3 guys. Wide receiver 4, CeeDee Lamb, a first rounder in dynasty startup drafts. What are your thoughts on CeeDee Lamb here at this spot?
I'm not going to fight anyone taking him at 4. I wouldn't want to be the guy taking the 4th receiver. I'd rather take the 5th or 6th at a little bit of a discount. I do like his quarterback situation. Little more inconsistency than I would like, but I still think his best days are ahead.
I think for me personally, this next guy would be my number 4, and that's Jalen Waddle. Waddle's the wide receiver 5. And all 5 of these are first rounders. We even have a couple other first round wide receivers that we'll get to. I think I prefer Waddle. We've seen some inconsistency from him as well this year, including that game on Sunday night against the Chargers. I kind of see Lamb and Waddle in their own tier. So for me, it's Jefferson and Chase, Brown on his own, and then Lamb and Waddle. Probably on their own.
I think that's safe. I didn't think that I would agree with you, but I do. I mean, I don't know who I prefer. I think I like Lamb a little more than Waddle. I think there's more volume there, but what about when Tyreek gets out of the way?
Yeah.
And then this other group, I could make a case for maybe 7 guys to get the 6th spot.
Well, and this is really where my rankings differ from ADP. A couple of the other names that we'll get to in the rest of our top 10, those are the receivers that I would consider in the same tier as Lamb and Waddle. So that's a little bit of a shakeup, and I'll get your thoughts on those guys when we get to them. So that's Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb, and Jalen Waddle as your top 5 wide receivers. Matt, if I told you had to sell one of those guys this offseason or label one as a sell in Dynasty, which one would it be?
I don't want to sell any of them.
You want them
Jefferson, because you get so much.
Sell? Yeah.
I mean, he's not a sell. I mean, I would pick him at 1-1, but the quarterback situation gives me a little bit of pause, and I'm just sitting here thinking I could get 3 great assets for him.
Well, I actually made a trade for Justin Jefferson just last week. I felt like I paid up, although after Sunday, it felt like a better deal.
Not a lot of buyer's remorse from you, I'm sure.
No. So I got Justin Jefferson. I gave T. Higgins.
Okay, we'll get to him.
Kenneth Walker. And a first-round pick, mid-first.
Yeah. My hunch, knowing you, is your team was pretty darn good, and you wanted the roster space, and you could afford to lose 2 starters for 1. But that's why I would trade Jefferson. If you're going to give me Walker and those 2 assets, I'm all ears. I'm not saying I definitely do it. Depends on my team, but I'm all ears. That's a nice price.
Yeah, I think it would be Lamb for me of this group of 5. And just thinking if I could pivot from him to some of those other names I kind of hinted at, I would do that. But yeah, you're right. These are all young wide receivers producing at a high level. These are the players we want to be the cornerstones of our dynasty teams. Matt, when we come back, we'll talk about those wide receivers 6 through 10, and I'll tell you exactly who I would have higher on the list.
I got a couple as well. So these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business, but you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. I mean, LinkedIn Jobs finds the right people for your team faster and for free. Simple tools like screening questions make it extremely easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1 at delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. So this episode is also brought to you by Audible. Audible, you guys are going to like this. Audible's releasing a slate of new football podcasts that you're sure that you're going to love. Find Block Forever now wherever you get your podcasts. So Block Forever is a brand new podcast from former NFL All-Pro offensive lineman Ryan Khalil and Audible. Khalil takes a conversation about football to the next level. He gets real about what happens on the field and behind the scenes in locker rooms, during team meetings, back at the hotel, travel, et cetera, et cetera. New episodes of Block Forever will be recorded and released every week ahead of Thursday Night Football. Ryan and his guests discuss topics like players' psyches, sports betting, playing through pain, being a leader, how to deal with combatant teammates, and much, much more. There's nothing out of bounds. It's available for free on Audible or wherever you get your podcasts. Catch the full Block Forever series available anywhere you get your podcast, available everywhere now. Audible, get in the game.
Thanks for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Matt, we're talking about the top 10 wide receivers in Dynasty leagues. This is based on December DLF Dynasty ADP. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, A.J. Brown, C.D. Lamb, and Jalen Waddle were the top 5 players. Let's get into the rest of the top 10. T. Higgins is the wide receiver 6. He is also a first rounder. It just feels a little
lower.
Rich. Feels a little rich for me.
I love Burrow, but I think that Chase thing doesn't help Higgins as much. He's a great player. I have 2 names I like better. One's on this list, and I don't think the other one is not. So should I just divulge those or wait till we get to the end here?
Just hold your horses. We'll get
All
there.
right.
We'll get there. I've got a couple names as well.
Okay.
Stephon Diggs is the wide receiver 7, and he is the last of the first round Dynasty startup picks. So that first round gave us 7 wide receivers. We talked about the running backs last week. So that was 7 wide receivers, 5 running backs, actually 4 running backs. We'll have one other player coming up soon that make up the top 12 overall in Dynasty. I guess I was a little surprised to see Diggs still in there. We start to see that discount on, veteran players around this time of year. So I would not be surprised if and when he falls into the second round this offseason. This next guy,
like we've talked a lot about Diggs and Hill and Adams and Kupp and those guys quite a bit.
Yep.
More and more, I don't think it's crazy to think the Bills' first round pick might be a wide receiver. Like Gabe Davis isn't quite getting it done. Would that change your Diggs outlook at all with the 30th pick in the draft? They take a receiver.
No, I mean,
he's still great.
I feel like they've tried to invest. I mean, they haven't invested first round picks, but they've tried to invest at the position. And I don't think anybody is going to come in there and overtake Stephon Diggs, honestly, at least not in the next year or two. So,
but it could be a succession plan.
Yeah, it could be. And that's fine. We've seen Tyreek Hill still thrive with Jalen Waddle there.
Sure.
I mean, we saw Cooper Kupp thrive. I don't know that Allen Robinson was much of a threat for targets. It didn't end up being that way, but they don't. I like Gabe Davis. Still feel like he has a lot of upside, but he certainly hasn't lived up to the expectations fantasy players had for him, and probably not the Bills either.
Yeah, he's not for me. I'm not a Davis fan.
This next guy is one of the players that I mentioned that I would have higher. He is the first player drafted in the second round, 13th overall, Chris Olave, the Saints rookie. I would have him up in that Lamb Waddle neighborhood. What do you think, Matt?
I would have him ahead of Higgins and Diggs. So I guess he qualifies, but I have 2 names I like better that we haven't brought up.
Okay. So was he one of those that you were okay?
I originally said there's 2. Maybe I should have included him because I think he should be higher. But there's 2 we haven't brought up that I like more than Olave, but I do like Olave more than Diggs and Higgins.
Tyreek Hill, 9 overall. Again, we saw Diggs, we saw Hill. Spoiler alert: Devontae Adams is not on this list, which is a little.
He has to be adjusted.
I don't know if I don't know if I want to say it's surprising, but to see the value gap in Diggs and Hill compared to Adams, I don't really get that.
I mean, if you're paying sticker price for him, I would buy Adams at a little cheaper than those other two.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're all lumped right together.
10th player on the list, another second rounder. And the last wide receiver we'll mention here, Amon-Ra St. Brown. He actually fell a little bit since last month, but still a nice option in the second round. 10th wide receiver drafted. He's another player, along with Chris Olave, that I would have up with Lamb and Waddle. So that tier for me is getting a little larger, and there's at least one other name not among this 10 that I would include there. Agreed. So who are your guys, Matt? Who are we missing?
St. Brown, because we hadn't talked about him yet.
Okay,
I think I would have him 6, right behind Waddle.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, and then probably Olave would be 7, Higgins 8, something like that. However, I think Garrett Wilson versus Olave is the question. I think I'd even rather have Wilson.
Yeah, so Garrett Wilson is actually the wide receiver 11. He was drafted right behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, so just missed the discussion here, but certainly is worthy of being included. And I'm with you. I think he's in that tier as well. So he's above even Higgins and Diggs for me, given the age, given the production. So that tier for me personally
doesn't even matter whose quarterback is. Well, kind of, but I mean, it might get an upgrade.
That tier would be more like Lamb, Waddle, Olave, St. Brown, and Garrett Wilson.
Good one. I may or may not include Higgins there, but he'd be last of the tier.
And then we actually see a little bit of a gap. Other players being drafted in the late second or early third round include DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, Drake London, Cooper Kupp, and Adams are down there. Godwin, Hollywood Brown. So you're starting to see a little bit of a drop off there. I think right now we have a really strong group of, let's say, 15 wide receivers.
Yeah,
and certainly a good mix of veterans and those young guys.
I know we have to get to the tight ends, but Metcalf could be third on this list next year.
Yeah. Well, he's been third. He's been third before, right?
Exactly.
I mean, he's been that high before, fell off a little bit with some of the questions about their offense. That's really what caused his initial fall. They trade Russell Wilson. They're what looks like in for a terrible season. It hasn't been a terrible season. He's been very good for the most part, and just hasn't really regained that value that he had. So you're right. He's he kind of looks like a value right now in these in this ADP.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, when we come back, we will talk about the top 10 tight ends. We'll try to get through that list.
I've told you guys a bunch about betonline.net. That's the only place I go to for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. Get your latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. Pro football, we got college bowl season, basketball, World Cup. They've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, Matt, we have to do it. We talked quarterbacks, we talked running backs, we talked wide receivers. We've got to get through the top 10 tight ends in dynasty leagues. And I talked about that breakdown of the top 12 players, the first rounders. We had 7 wide receivers. We had 4 running backs. And that extra player is Mark Andrews. He's the tight end 1, and he was a first round startup pick according to our December DLF Dynasty ADP. Are you taking Mark Andrews in the first round?
No. I've cooled on him a little bit. I mean, I never thought he's an elite athlete. You know, that's why he wasn't a super high pick, but he's a really good player, of course. To pull back the curtain, I do an in-depth, deep dive analysis of the Steelers' opponents for Steelers.com every week. You know, really heavy lead stats. And I didn't realize how cool Andrews has been for about 6 weeks now. And the Steelers shut him down to some degree as well. I don't even blame him. I mean, it's just their passing game is so bizarre, and no one fears their receivers at all, that I don't know, including Kelsey, if anyone gets more attention than him at the tight end position.
Yeah, especially given the start that he was off to this season, which really is what pushed him up into this range, not only to the tight end one spot, but as consideration to be a first rounder. You're right. It's not just a 1 or 2 week thing. It's not the injury to Lamar Jackson. It's not even his own injury that Andrews was dealing with several weeks ago. It's just kind of all of it, but he is on a cold streak. I believe I saw that he was averaging just around 7 fantasy points since week 7.
That sounds right. Yeah.
And as we're now moving into the fantasy playoffs, just yet another tight end that unfortunately you can't really count on for consistent production.
It doesn't sound like a first round pick to me.
The tight end 2, Kyle Pitts, still hanging on.
He's back to being my 1.
Is he really?
I'm enticed, man.
No.
He hurt me so bad in so many leagues, but I can't quit him. I have to think his quarterback play is going to be better going forward. Mariota was really, really bad. And I don't think that Arthur Smith just doesn't like throwing the ball. I think they just did that because their quarterback play was so bad. I think they'll use Pitts. It's just they didn't.
I'm not there yet. I do still have Andrews even on that cold streak. I've got Andrews as the dynasty tight end 1, not quite in that first round range, but above Kyle Pitts. So Kyle Pitts is a second rounder. Also a second rounder is Travis Kelce. Obviously, the only question about Kelce when it comes to his dynasty value is his age, 31 years old, I believe. Is that enough to push him out of the second round, or do you think this is fair value given he's really the one tight end that we can count on right now?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, it just depends on how you want to build your team. You know, I mean, you're giving up on Garrett Wilson to take Travis Kelce, and that, I mean, they couldn't be any different in terms of team building.
Yeah, very true. So we've got Andrews in the first, Pitts and Kelce in the second, and then we have a major drop off, which I'm sure most of you would expect. We don't see another tight end drafted until the 5th round, and this represents a little bit of a change here. We've got TJ Hawkinson up to our tight end 4. Of course, he overtakes and leapfrogs George Kittle, who is drafted a round later. Kittle is our tight end 5. How are you valuing those two guys? Do you have it Hawk and then Kittle, or do you still have Kittle ahead?
I really am impressed with Minnesota's Hawkinson plan. You know, I mean,
same.
That to me solidifies it. I've always liked the player. They very much have a role for him, and it's every week. So yes, he is 4 for me.
Yeah, the Kittle stuff is really frustrating.
Yeah,
really frustrating.
Too many mouths.
Been a bad year for him. Your guy up there in Pittsburgh is the tight end 6, Pat Freiermuth. I think very deserving of that. Maybe could argue that he should be even higher given his age.
He's more consistent than Kittle.
Yeah, he really has been. Tight end 7 in that same round as Freiermuth is Dalton Schultz. I mean, I like Schultz. Yeah. He's fine, but I mean, if Freiermuth and Schultz are going in the same round, that just feels off to me. Schultz is also being drafted based on this ADP ahead of Dallas Goedert, who's an 8th rounder, ahead of David Njoku, who's a 9th rounder. I want both of those guys over Dalton Schultz.
Stole my thunder. I'm like, Goedert and Schultz to me aren't even close. Goedert and Freiermuth are very close to me. I don't know that Goddard's far off Hawkinson, to be honest with you. I mean, if I can get Goedert in round 8, sign me up. I mean, I'll take 7 position players and be thrilled to take him in round 8. I'm also a Njoku fan. I would take Njoku well over Schultz.
Yeah, I would imagine this Goedert ADP is a result of that injury, whether it's, out of sight, out of mind, or if it's, some just worried about how he comes back. I'm not worried about Goedert. I'm with you. I want him much higher than this, or at least up there in that Kittle Freiermuth range.
Yes.
As I mentioned, David Njoku is the tight end 9. I think that's a great value in the 9th round. Also a 9th rounder is the last player we'll mention here, Greg Dulcich, the rookie from the Broncos. he's been inconsistent, which is probably to be expected from a rookie, from really any player in that offense, because it's tough to find consistency in that offense that's been such a disappointment. So Dulcich is a little bit of the shining star from the Denver team this year.
Yeah, I mean, Dulcich is a nice story, a good player, all that. But can't we do better than tight end 10 for, someone there? I mean, I think I'd take Waller still ahead of him. We didn't even, talk about out of sight, out of mind. I mean,
yeah. Yeah. Darren Waller falls out of the top 10. Sounds like he will be back on the field soon. I certainly hope so.
As long as he's back next year, I'd rather have than Dulcich.
Yeah, I think I would as well. Waller actually is the next tight end drafted, but he falls to the 10th round. Cole Kmet you're not there.
I don't like the way he moved. I think he's a kind of a heavy-footed guy.
Yeah, he's an 11th rounder. Trey McBride is an 11th rounder, the rookie for the Cardinals. So, yeah,
Evan Ingram. I'm just kind of reaching in really massive recency bias.
Yeah, probably the best game of his career we saw on Sunday. I mean, he's in this range. I think I would rather have Dulcich than Ingram.
I would too. I'm just trying to come up with a name.
All right, that is your top 10 tight ends in Dynasty. Andrews, Pitts, Kelsey, Hawkinson, Kittle, Freiermuth, Schultz, Goddard, Njoku, and Greg Dulcich. Matt and I disagreed on a couple of those. We want Goddard and Njoku higher, Schultz lower. We're not sure what to do with George Kittle, and it seems like neither are the 49ers.
Right.
That will do it for today's show. Please make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to the Locked On Dynasty channel on YouTube. Remember to follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Dynasty. Follow Matt at Williamson NFL. And I'm Ryan, MC23. We'll be back next time with more Locked On Dynasty.